Yo, Slay the Spire 2 is here, which means changes for my favorite character, the Defect. So I'll be covering all the builds they have, old and new, with timestamps in the description below. Starting off with the Defect's main mechanic, Orbs. We have the returning types, Lightning, Frost, Darkness, and Plasma, along with a new one, Glass. I would say that with changes like removing Blizzard from Frost and the addition of Lightning Rod, mixed orb builds are generally the way to go, with either Lightning, Darkness, or Glass serving as damage dealers and using Frost as defense. Starting off with the base cards for Lightning and Frost, we have Zap, Ball Lightning, and Lightning Rod, along with Cold Snap, Cool-Headed, Glacier, and Chill, with the powers Hailstorm and Thunder helping with their respective types. There are also the options of Ice Lance and Tempest, but if you have a good draw with cards like Cool-Headed and Overclock, I'd say that your energy is better used in other cards. Now, I've put these two types of orbs together because they both want the same thing, to be cycled as much as possible. And to do that with the best efficiency, you'll also need Focus, which Slay the Spire 2 has stepped away from more permanent sources, so cards like Hotfix and Focus Strike are going to be your main sources, with your only real permanent source being Defrag, which has been moved up to rare. Moving on to Dark Orbs, your main sources for these are going to be Null, Darkness, and Shadow Shield, and a build using these is going to be quite different from ones using Lightning, as Dark Orb's main gimmick is stacking damage, so using cards like Duel, Multi, or Quadcast are the best to use with them. You can combine Dark and Lightning Orbs, but I wouldn't recommend them unless you're going for a higher focus and lower evoke rate build. And for the final orbs, Plasma and Glass, I'd say they both fit well into a support role, as Plasma can be evoked for more energy than you put in, so with enough draw and orb pondering, you can storm off quite a bit. But it can also just sit with Dark, giving extra energy every turn. With Glass, it just provides blanket damage, but if you're running Dark, Glass stacks the opposite way, losing damage every turn, and Spinner makes you lose some control over when you evoke your orbs, so while it can be played together, Glass is much better with other orbs. Long ago, when cards were first created, some were made to stand above others, and so we say, Claw is law. Jokes aside, the zero cost deck is probably one of the most fun in the game, using cards like All for One and Scrape to churn through your deck, with the best cards being Beam Cell, Bow for the Eyes, and Claw, often being able to play them 3 times per turn. The best synergies this deck has is Hologram with One for All, as with extra energy through Plasma or Turbo, you can play most of your discard multiple times, stacking debuffs and growing Claw to ridiculous proportions. This deck, while being one of the most fun, is also probably one of the simplest as well, just needing you to play Scrape or All for One, then just dumping your hand. You do have to keep in mind if you have Vulnerable to apply it before playing everything else, but other than that, there's no real sequencing decisions to be made. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing. Moving on to Defect's new build for Slay the Spire 2, Status Cards. Returning from the first game, Overclock and Turbo both create status cards, which used to only be downsides, but with the addition of cards like Compact, Rocket Punch, Flat Cannon, and Trash to Treasure, those status cards can become something useful. Aside from those cards, this build enjoys really efficient cards like Gunk Up and Fight Through. To play this kind of deck, you need to make sure you have some way of getting rid of those status cards. You can manage using Turbo and Gunk Up just as efficient cards, as their statuses can be exhausted by themselves, and in Act 1, you can use other status-making cards with Smokestack, as the efficiency with the extra damage from Smokestack can usually clear most enemies before it becomes a problem. But past that, making sure you have some way to keep their numbers low before dumping everything is something that's necessary. Now with the final build, Powers, which I would say is one of the hardest decks to build. Looking at cards like Storm, Subroutine, and Creative AI, you can see how this build might start, but there's 2 problems with this build. One is that you need a critical mass of powers, and 2, you need a sub-build like the ones I talked about earlier, which is why I put this deck as last. Creative AI is the only way to repeatedly add powers to your deck. other than having white noise with Soul's power. So once you run out of powers in your deck, you don't have much to do anymore, which is why it's the sub build you really need to be building towards. So hyper buffing Orbs with multiple loops, or zero cost with Feral, this deck can really support anything. This deck plays a bit differently because it really needs another archetype to support it. You can use this kind of deck to get a burst of damage and cards from powers like Storm and Subroutine, but once your powers run out, you should be buffed up enough from all the powers you played to finish with the rest of your deck. Now, the last section I want to reserve for cards that are just especially good. Cards that I usually take no matter what the build is. Hologram, Turbo, and Overclock, as a combination of them allows you to freely access your discard pile and grab more energy or cards whenever you need them, while sometimes playing double finishers like Barrage or Sunder. But just the consistency these cards can provide to any build is just unmatched, and I'd recommend grabbing them whenever you can. But those are all the builds that Defect has, and just remember that you can always have builds bleed into each other. Any build can use Orbs, and any build can play powers. There are so many uses for each card that I can only tell you what each card is best at, not everything it can do. But if you're interested in seeing this type of guide for other characters, or want a more in-depth guide for each card, please let me know in the comments below. And thank you for watching.